Thank you, Hugh, for your opening comments to this first virtual Labour Coast and Country conference. So I'm Pam Buchan, Labour Coast and Country Director, Plymouth City Councillor and from South West Devon CLP, and an otherwise marine social scientist. Welcome to this first session, which is a view from the coast and the country. This is a quick-fire panel-only session, and we'll hear from speakers from different geographical tiers to get a view from around the country, speaking for a very strict 4 minutes each. We won't be asking for questions for this session, but please pop your ideas about key issues into the chat, and we'll look at them during and after the event. Before I introduce the panellists, I'd like to set the scene and share some of my own thoughts. For too long, Labour's policies have focused on cities. It's understandable that the Labour movement arose primarily through urban working environments, but it's not only a political imperative to win in rural and coastal England, but also should be on our moral conscience that a fair and equitable Britain cannot exclude rural and coastal communities. For future policy development, we need rural and coastal proofing. This means that for every policy we propose, we ask ourselves, how does this serve people living in the countryside? How does this address the challenges of those in coastal communities? We're in the early days of significant political, economic and environmental upheaval in the UK. Brexit's on the doorstep and means the loss of significant funding and investment in our rural and coastal industries and deprived areas of the country. It also means a legislative shake-up for farming, fishing and environmental management. On top of this, we have climate change, through which we're already experiencing more extreme weather and changes to our seasonal patterns. As well as impacting on rural and coastal industries, the effects of climate change will be particularly felt by those living closest to nature. Towns built on floodplains and coastal villages at the margins of the sea are the first to face the brunt of these environmental changes. What are the policies that will protect these communities or compensate for losses and changes? How will we manage the decision-making on holding the line or retreating? And how do we manage the changing face of places that hold strong identities which are being directly threatened by climate change? Whilst carbon reduction is high on the environmental agenda, we also need policy which will support communities directly affected by the changes happening now and forecast to be unpreventable, even if we went carbon neutral tomorrow. Will we create space and resources for community-led placemaking? Or will we choose a top-down approach that secures national targets at the expense of vulnerable rural and coastal communities? So there's some of my thoughts, and we'll now hear about other key issues. Our speakers in this session will talk for 4 minutes each, addressing the question, what are the key challenges facing rural and coastal communities? So our speakers are first Councillor Pat Osborne from Blandford Forum Town Council in North Dorset. Then we'll hear from County and District Councillor Judi Billing, leader of the Labour group in Hertfordshire County Council. And then finally, there will be a view from Durham Police and Crime Commissioner candidate, Councillor Joy Allen, who is Cabinet Lead for Transformation, Culture and Tourism at Durham County Council. So over to you, Pat, please take your 4 minutes.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, so existing challenges, really, there are, I guess I would split that into two. There are the existing challenges and the new challenges that are coming about or will come about because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the existing challenges within North Dorset, first of all, low wages, high house prices. That tends to mean that young people can't get on the property ladder. We've got brain drain, talented young people moving away from North Dorset to take their lives forward in other places around the country. So that's not good. That's not great for sustainable communities. It's not great for the fact that the networks of friends and families are eroded because of that. So that's a big challenge. Transport infrastructure. So North Dorset is across a large geographical area. It's 25 miles from top to bottom, from north to south, and 30 miles from east to west. There's only one train station in North Dorset, so you come into North Dorset and you go out of North Dorset. The main road from north to south is a sea road, and traffic routinely gets blocked there. A town called, or a little village called Melbury Abbas, that's known locally as the village of the jammed. Now that's no real laughing matter when we've had instances where on-call ambulances have got stuck there for over half an hour, and it's a good 20-30 minutes away from any hospital anywhere within North Dorset. So there's that lack of access to markets and services is a big problem. It means that it keeps wages are kept low as a result of it. Businesses are unable to grow because the transport infrastructure is not in place. Bus services, the Tories have, due to austerity, cut the remaining 35 subsidised bus services down to 7 subsidised bus services in 2017. So everyone's pretty dependent on a car. So as we try to look at meeting some of our environmental challenges, getting around in North Dorset and helping people to overcome those challenges is really important. And then there's the new challenges as well. So the new challenges of COVID. So in Dorset, around about a third of people were furloughed. Now, we're already seeing small businesses struggling. We've seen shops and restaurants close throughout the pandemic. And in a small market town, within North Dorset, 5 small market towns make up the main population areas. Their populations are somewhere between 9 and 15,000 people. So they're small. The high streets are small where they still exist. And when you lose a small business, it's gone. So if you lose a butcher's, you've lost the butchers for the town, and you've got 15 miles to travel somewhere else to find another service of that service of that type. So that's a concern. But with a third of people furloughed, currently, once that funding stops, we are expecting to see unemployment spike quite dramatically. Now, in North Dorset, that's unemployment has traditionally been or typically been relatively low. There's only one job centre in North Dorset, so again, having access to the services that are needed is problematic. Council funding as well to provide services, all of that's been hit by the pandemic too. So those are the real challenges that we're facing at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you, Pat. Spot on in timing, and some really important issues there about local economy and transport. So next up, I'll hand over to Councillor Judi Billing.
Thank you very much. Am I unmuted? Yes, I am unmuted. I'm not very good at timing myself over 4 minutes, so I might even take less. But let me just explain myself a little bit. It's lovely to be here this morning, but one of the most important jobs that I do is to represent 450 or so local councillors in the Eastern region on the Association of Labour Councillors. So the Eastern region is full of coast and country and market towns and bigger places like Cambridge and Ipswich and Norwich as well. But I see country living as a Labour councillor very much associated with market town life. And for me, it's been a sort of a mission for many years. Andrew Gwynn and now Steve Reed both know this, to make sure that the party nationally understands what we're up to and actually comes to see us from time to time. So this week for me has been utterly thrilling, because whilst I managed to persuade Andrew Gwynn in 2019 to come and launch our local election campaign that led to North Hertfordshire becoming a Labour-led council, can you believe? But actually this week we hosted a visit on Thursday from Mr. Sir Keir Starmer, who came to see what life is like in a pandemic in a market town. And of course, the fantasy people have about places like market towns like Hitchin is that they are Tory heartlands. Well, they are, if you take in all the most rural places. But just to give you an example, Hitchin, the lovely ancient market town, has 13 district councillors representing it, 8 of whom are Labour district councillors. And this comes as a great surprise and a shock. And the reason we must trumpet this and make sure that the party nationally understands it is that very often in places where you have a group of 8 out of 13 or 2 out of 57, even, I think of Huntingdon and places like that, the Labour councillors in those places are absolutely the people flying the flag for the Labour Party day in, day out, and making sure that Labour is seen as viable and interesting and vibrant and caring in those places. So the thing I wanted to focus on this morning is the way in which our bubbles of Labour representation are currently being threatened by a government that is pretending to talk about devolution and making all councils unitary, but is actually talking about massive centralisation and suggesting, for instance, that Hertfordshire becomes a single unitary authority. Now that's an authority of 1.2 million, no, nearly 1.3 million people, representing an area of tiny hamlets and villages, and Stevenage and Watford and St Albans. And it just makes absolutely no sense unless you really are trying to wipe out Labour representation where it flourishes and is famously on the ground for people. And I say that because after this session, I'm going to have to leave you because the first Saturday of every month in Hitchin is Councillors' Surgery Day, where we meet with people from across the area and make sure that they know that we're here, that we're Labour and that we represent them day in and day out, dealing with the services that they need and the attention that they tend not to get from some of our Tory counterparts. Shall I stop there?
That is perfectly on time as well. Thank you very much. Yes, spot on, possibly 2 seconds spare. And really good to hear you raise the issue of the reorganisation of local government, because this is something that should be pretty high on all of our agendas, I think. So finally, thank you for Judi, we have Councillor Joy Allen, who is the PCC candidate for Durham.
Welcome everybody, I'm delighted to be here this morning. I think this is a really, really timely conference and a very, very important one, given the 2021 elections is just round the corner. I think Durham was the last county council standing last time around, and we want to win back the other councils that we lost, the Nottinghams, Northumberland, who were going through some stages. So it's delighted that we've got the Shadow Cabinet here to listen to what's important, because we want to win back all those seats. Durham is the largest council in the North East. We have 126 county councillors. We are obviously in the leadership. And we have the council side of it as well, but it is challenging. I think we've seen that, but I think there's real lockdown. We had to sort of promote all the things about what you could do when lockdown was finished. It was particularly challenging in Durham because we haven't got an elected police and crime commissioner at the moment. Unfortunately, Ron Hogg died, and we've now got a chief executive who's acting police and crime commissioner, and we've got a temporary chief exec, so it's really, really challenging times. However, it might have been a blessing in disguise, because I don't think it'll have escaped your notice about the Dominic Cummins visit to County Durham during lockdown. However, again with my tourism hat on, there was some positives there, because it all broke out when English Tourism Week was on, and we've seen 155% increase in traffic to our website. So coming out of that, I think there's real opportunities there for us, because it's worth the tourism sector is worth a lot of money to us. And I think the challenges, particularly for some of the mining communities like Durham, some of the communities now have got real opportunities to be tourism destinations, like Seaham in the coast that we've got. We've invested £10 million. We're doing a marina. We're doing a retirement village in there, and it's trying to win the hearts and minds of previous mining communities to see the opportunities within the tourism side. However, going back to the police and crime side, for me, it is a challenge. And I think the Dominic Cummings visit was a cause of concern locally. We did have a lot of attention and obviously put the police to have to respond to that. However, when lockdown was eased, we did see that we had to close roads because people did make the place to the beautiful countrysides and the coasts, and roads had to be closed because there was a bit of disorder in those areas where people were just getting out and enjoying it. So I've got real concerns about the implications of the Dominic Cummings effect, particularly on public health and police and our efforts to control the virus currently and in the future. During lockdown, there was also opportunities when we talked about alcohol and domestic violence. So as Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham and Darlington, alcohol is going to be a big issue for me. 93% of officers believe that it's got a large impact on domestic violence, and also the link to alcohol-related traffic accidents and road traffic collisions. So we're looking at, as police and crime, is to look at road safety, because a lot of those killed and seriously injured are on our country roads, and that's something that we really want to do. I'm very fortunate that I live next door but one to a farmer's daughter who actually works on a father's farm, and I've seen some of the issues that she's had to deal with during COVID, with the fly tipping, the instance on quad bikes, the destruction of fields, and I think there's some real, as Durham Police and Crime Commissioner, the rural aspect of crime is going to be really important. I welcome Farm Watch, and I'm on the app, so I can see what people are reporting, which is really, really important. But then having the response, and I think that's something where the community can play a big role.
Thank you, Joy. Sorry, I need to chip in there. Thank you. That was really useful and really interesting to hear about the different impacts through COVID on our different communities. I think that's something that hasn't been necessarily adequately recognised during this period. So thank you for that, and for the police and crime perspective as well.